So this is the artist lecture for set 1. This is for sets 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5. So all of the marks made in this set must be original to the software. You cannot use images or resources from the internet. So everything you must create will be created within using shapes, using brushes, etc. So to get started, we have 1.3. So the concept is a war of shapes can produce hybrids. So the key kinetic trigger mechanisms are repeat, combine, superimpose, hybridize, and symbolize. So it says to use colored paper to cut out repetitive units of two different shapes, colors. For example, circles and squares, deploy the units from different backgrounds and have them sort of attack each other. So when they meet in the middle, they produce hybrid shapes. The offspring shapes should be unique, but exhibit characteristics of both parent shapes. So if you look in the textbook, the image from Peter Johnson, Kinetic Energy Encounters, not Kinetic Energy Encounters, the Jean Martinelli Shape Wars Pen and Ink, that's going to be sort of the best example that we're going to be following. So we're looking at some artists that kind of work in a similar vein. Now we look at artists here that kind of loosely take these ideas and work through them. So a lot of our assignments, studio actions, are very specific. So finding work that exactly matches it can be difficult. So this is more for general inspiration. So we kind of have this piece, and we kind of have these two contrasting shapes kind of appeal together. The yellows are kind of more long. This is sort of far-fetched, but sort of these two shapes kind of working together and thinking about, they are the same shape, but when they're interacting, the forms they're creating, and I'm looking sort of at these individual forms and these new shapes that are being created as they're overlapping. I am deeply inspired by quilting, so think about this as a positive, negative. So we have these shapes and these tessellating patterns that kind of meet together, and these new shapes that kind of interact and form in the middle. This is actually just a carpet sample, but I do like the forms that it creates. And thinking about contrast too. Think about that value in shape from these 2D elements that you'll bring in. Again, this is sort of the same shape, but kind of where they're kind of interacting in the middle is really interesting. And this is a little far-fetched, but MC Escher does have these kind of projects where you work from one end to another, and these forms hybridize in the center, and they might be good inspiration. And we're going to probably think more simply than that, but how this and that kind of form together create all these different elements. So 1.4 is a scribble field. Do not just scribble your marks up. You want to kind of keep them, think about the energy and texture. So 1.4, the scribble field, is an all-over pattern of squiggly lines, and they tend to generate visual energy. So we're to think about repeat, superimpose, animate, disguise. So you're going to fill an entire sheet of paper or your artboard. The squiggly lines produce all-over energy patterns. Repeat and superimpose. Long lines, little tightly woven visual textures produced. Now, when you tend to scribble without thought, that is people can point that out. I can clock that a mile away. Please think about the the patterns. This is going to be very feeling about how you could develop this energy even in a digital space. And I really want to touch on sort of positive and negative relationships here. So we have these negative backgrounds, this white background, and then the positive of being these sort of this like fenced where things are falling apart. And think about what is happening within the where it's connected, but what's happening when it's not connected. And this is just a piece of fabric that's been kind of torn away with woven, but thinking about the energy of what's over and under might be a good, interesting way to pull and play. We had this kind of tightly woven from the linen, and then where the weft and the warp are kind of been shifted around and plucked out to have this sort of over under feel with it. Even sort of shifting the typical white background with black lines, you could have a black background with white marks, and thinking about the opposites here. And this is just paintbrush that's been added with a lot of white, so the gravity is pulling through. So even thinking about these lines, how they're have that energy, but these single lines that pull out. Even in a 3D space, this idea can be executed with Eva Hess. She does a lot of rope pieces. And actually, if you're interested in this project, get to the Phoenix Art Museum. I think it's closing this week. There's a great fibers work that you should check out. This is actually more of a perfect for our project, thinking about where they're this energy and where it's kind of flowing up, and the thinness of the mark and then the thickness of line. Thinking about what a line could be and could not be. And you're welcome to use color. A lot of people stray away from color, but I think that's definitely a good way to kind of add that layering to think about color. So 1.5 is the dot energy pattern. Again, don't just put a bunch of dots in and hope it's the best. So a closely packed dots produce visual energy. So this is jumping off of the 1.4, the scribble field. So we're thinking about visual energy. Repeat, juxtapose, animate. So you're developing energy pattern. You're sort of creating a background, and then you're adding dots on pods. So you're lots of layering. So you're going to pay attention to your layers here, especially in Photoshop. Play around with opacity. Play around with your blending modes a little bit to see how you can really kind of closely pack these energies. Now the textbook says he doesn't want you to overlap, but I want you to overlap. I think there's something really great about that quality. Yaya Kusama, really inspired by dots and sort of this mirrored room and where this overlaying is, especially when we're thinking about color. So we have all this field color here, and again, this is a physical space. But if we have to think about it flattened as a 2D space, these parts here that are kind of gorgeous. Again, maybe you have sort of boundaries where your lines kind of live in. Vary the sizes of your dots, quote unquote. Maybe there's kind of more of a pattern to your work and method. Again, this is rope, but if I kind of blur your eyes a little, you can kind of see these as individual dots and how things work together. You can, again, this is a physical piece. You can have large and then tiny bits. and thinking about contrast too. There's a lot of really different ways you can approach this, which always makes it very exciting. Even thinking of these 3D works, I think are really exciting. The type of depth that this creates. Again, this is a physical object, but I'm really interested in sort of the subtlety of the blue and the white. Even glitch art can take inspiration from this. Maybe push the idea of your dot elsewhere. Maybe your dots live in shapes that are overlapping. So look at some student work. Now there's so many different possibilities. Remember, these are only 15 points each, so I don't want you to stress over them, but I want you to spend time really exploring these ideas and concepts. So depending on if your monitor is calibrated and the brightness, we have sort of this flattened look with this green and blue, which are pretty much the same hue. And it's kind of this murky war of shapes where they're kind of overlapping and not quite meeting. You have these organic shapes and these geometric shapes, and we're meeting together. And a lot of students, like the textbook, have added lines to think about. Remember, line gives us a way to look, and we see energy being pushed through the line. And this could be a very kind of fun way to really kind of emphasize that war and the generation of energy. Student examples for 1.4. And 1.5. So there's a lot of different ways to approach these assignments, which makes it very fun, especially for me to see all the different examples. In our Canvas discussion boards, there is a discussion board for set 1. Although we are all online and we don't get to have sort of the community that the in-person class does, please post your thoughts about the assignment, questions you may have, maybe in progress. Hey, I'm working on this thing. What does everyone think? Or, hey, does anyone know how to use this tool? And we could all work together as a class within those discussion boards. So I'm excited to see what you have, and good luck.